Hello, my name is Christine, and I run a vintage shop called Prima Treasures on Etsy. Today, I wanted to talk about these rustic wood carving figures. And the reason I want to talk about them is because I believe they basically date to like the 60s, 70s, basically that mid century era. And this is a good example of the kind of thing that you really can't find anymore. You don't tend to see carved wood statues or figurines in retail stores and home decor stores and places like that. So, for those of you who like this look or who just like the idea of their decor items made out of natural materials, natural materials being wood or stone or metal of some kind, vintage is pretty much your only option for finding that type of decor. Well, especially if you don't want to pay, say, a high end price to like an artist, that kind of thing. I believe if you were to, find a high end artist that was, making carvings by hand, you could probably find sculptures made of real wood. But for the most part, these smaller, just sort of purely decorative pieces are not something you're going to see in retail anymore. So I put a few of them out here just to kind of give examples of the sorts of things that you can find if you go to estate sales or thrift stores where people are kind of getting rid of items that they find at grandma's house. And so what we have here is, I really like this carved wood eagle. And then next to the eagle is a little swordfish. And both of these sculptures have a very rustic, roughly cut base, which seems to be very typical of this particular style. So often you'll see when it has a base like this that it's from that period. And the wood is very heavy and dense. I have seen people refer to it as ironwood, but I don't really know enough about wood to really quantify that. But they all tend to have this type of base, so that makes it fairly easy to identify. And then over here, the other example that we have is these very tall and slender Don Quixote figurines. Actually, this one's over a foot tall, so arguably once you get into that 10 to 12 inch and over size, I think you've kind of crossed from figurine into sculpture, but that's just my personal opinion. In my mind, figurines are things that are like, maybe 8 inches or smaller. But anyway, these figurines I happen to know date to the 70s because I found photos of this type of item in an old Sears catalog. So in that particular case, it's fairly easy to date this style right here. And we have several different sizes. One has a lighter wood, one has a darker wood. And the wood that these are made from is pretty lightweight. It's not heavy or dense. And they're also very kind of primitively carved. Some of them came from Spain, but in general, this type of rustic look was heavy in decor around the 70s. So, regardless of what the figure is, if it has this type of style, that's probably the era that we're talking about. They're usually not marked. I mean, if you were lucky, you might find a sticker on it. But for the most part, they tend to be unsigned and unmarked. So it's really the styling that kind of helps you categorize what you have. The nice thing about all of these figurines is that you're generally going to find them for $10 or less. And as I say, since this is something that you're extremely unlikely to find in a retail store, really your only way to own something like this would be to spot it in a thrift store. I found both of these in a thrift store, and both of these also at a Goodwill. So, they fairly regularly come through the thrift stores. And I have seen that at estate sales as well, but it's definitely not the kind of thing that you're likely to find any other way. So I hope this gives you some helpful information about these particular figures and where you might find them if you're interested. And I appreciate you watching. Thank you.